Due to the severe complications associated with cystic fibrosis, some parents choose to undergo embryo screening to ensure that their future child will not have cystic fibrosis. Evaluate some of the economic, social, and ethical issues associated with embryo screening for cystic fibrosis. 4 marks. So if I was answering this question, I'd aim to have 1 economic reason, 1 social reason, and 1 ethical reason, and then 1 extra one that I could think of. So you can have any 4 of the following. High cost, which is obviously an economic reason. So there's a high cost associated with embryonic screening, very well-trained scientists, doctors, genetic counsellors. The process itself is very expensive. It's quite labour-intensive. Another economic reason is that it's not available on the NHS, and that's kind of also an ethical reason as well, because it means that a lot of people won't be able to access this very expensive treatment. It's an emotional process for the parents, so this is a social reason. It's very difficult if they find out that a fetus or an embryo has got cystic fibrosis. They've got a difficult decision to make as to whether they want to continue with that embryo or whether they want to abort it. It's a small operation is required to remove and implant the embryos. So this is a social reason again, because it carries risk of infection. Any operation carries risk. Always remember that for any question in biology. The risk of infection, also the risk of anaesthetic. It's possible that you might not wake up, very rarely. It's physically draining for the mother, so obviously she has to have the embryos removed. They have to be artificially sort of grown, for example. She has to be given hormones to help her produce lots and lots of embryos so they could be screened. So again, that's a social reason. Ethically, it could lead to the idea of designer babies. So lots of people have an objection to this. They don't like the idea that the babies are being chosen. They're almost being designed, and they think in the future that people might be able to choose their embryos according to whether they have a certain eye colour or a certain hair colour. So where do you end the line? Where do you draw that line between what is okay, so screening for cystic fibrosis, and what is not okay, for example, choosing a hair colour? There's also religious objections. So again, in the ethical perspective, you're choosing the embryos to continue with. And people with cystic fibrosis still live a life. So is it ethically right to not give those embryos the opportunity to have that life? Are embryos classed as life? This very much comes into the ethical perspective, and a lot of religions have that objection to the process, as they class embryos very much as life and potential life that will grow into, yes, a not very healthy baby, but people with cystic fibrosis do still live very good lives. Many perfectly viable embryos will be destroyed in the process. So obviously a lot of embryos will be produced that don't even have cystic fibrosis, and all of those will be destroyed. Just one will be chosen to carry through to pregnancy, as well as all the ones that have the cystic fibrosis gene. They'll also be destroyed, is that ethically correct? With current treatment, people with cystic fibrosis do still have a decent quality of life. So that is the key thing there, and how it all relates together ethically and socially. With more and more treatments, people with cystic fibrosis are leading better and better qualities of lives. So there's a lot to be said there.